Two guys, one movie. Mad Dog Edition.
In 3D.
On ice.
No on ice.
No on ice? Oh, I guess we're done with that gimmick for a
In
while.
an apartment building.
Jesus Christ. This is Steve Arviso.
And Charles Musick.
And today we are bringing you Quarantine.
Now, we're talking about the movie Quarantine, not what you saw in the news earlier today.
Yes, no, this is not the exact same thing that's going on in Dallas right now. But man, is it topical? We really had to just go and do this, right, in the middle of all this Ebola shit. But yes, Quarantine.
Starring Jennifer Carpenter. Who you might know as Dexter's sister in Dexter.
Deb?
Deb.
Yes.
Dexter's sister.
Dexter's sister. Quarantine, a touching story of what happens when you don't put Old Yeller down.
Well, you think that, I mean, this is about basically rabies and an extreme,
Pretty much it's rabies taken to the rage virus from 28/28 weeks later.
like a super version of rabies.
Yeah.
So-
Super rabies. So the rage virus.
Now,
Which actually pretty much wasn't that it? Which we'll get to eventually at the end of the month, but
now what I was saying is, though, I mean, you know, I'm gonna assume most people have seen this, so I am gonna talk about spoilers here and stuff. But obviously the rabies all came from this little girl's dog that lived in this apartment.
Mhm.
If the virus was moving that quickly, like literally we're seeing people change in 5 minutes, right?
yeah.
Why wouldn't the dog have changed on the trip to the vet? Is the vet like next door?
Well, I assume they're playing with the idea that it evolves
Okay.
with time.
So from maybe animals it's not so effective, but humans it's super effective? Like
That could be the
it's
case.
mutated?
It could be something along the lines where dogs take longer to be affected, because it seems to infect humans very easily, and then it changes them, in a matter of minutes from as the movie progresses.
But basically,
It's 28 days later in an
Jennifer
apartment
Carpenter
building.
is a news reporter. She's following around these two firefighters, kind of like cops, but I guess it's called firefighters.
Is it? I think it's a news special that they're
Yeah,
supposed to
and
do,
she's
something
following
like
around, for the night, and they get a call about this, some woman that's in her apartment that needs help. They go into this building, and they get quarantined.
that. Yeah. Well, I believe someone gets bit or sick. They call,
But by the time they go to the doors to get out, they're already locked in.
yeah, the CDC's already arrived, and they've locked that. It's funny that Hollywood CDC would respond so quickly, so promptly. Yet,
It's make-believe, Steve.
it's make-believe. Yeah, well, it's the only way the CDC would get their shit together.
If it was real, that building would have been condemned before they even got there to quarantine it off.
If it was real, they
Don't
never
come
would.
after me.
If it was real, they never would have had the opportunity to quarantine it.
There you go.
Jennifer Carpenter would have been bitten and on an airplane headed towards fucking who knows
Next
wherever.
thing you know, Dexter's, infected.
Yeah. You might just start killing more.
Yes. But, I like the actual concept of the movie. It's based off, another movie, Record, which I haven't actually seen.
Yes, Spanish language film. I don't remember if it's from Spain. It might be Spanish. I don't remember.
But you were saying it's very similar.
Very similar. Pretty much the exact same plot. There are some details that change. I believe it's stated that the American version had a slightly different origin for the virus.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's pretty much the exact same plot, despite some little details in the dialogue and whatnot. Pretty much, following into an apartment building, get locked in, crazy shit happens, and then classic ending. Other than that, it's pretty much the same film.
I like the idea that, they're in this building, it's dark, you really don't know how many people are in this building. I mean, they're trying to figure out how many minutes and they're going over it, but everyone's fine. Next thing you know, here's a new person that's infected. Now they're trying to kill you or rip your throat out,
Yeah, I mean, it plays, like I said, it's pretty much like 28 Days Later, but in a apartment complex. If it was just all restricted to an apartment complex. Because in those movies, even in a typical zombie film, there's always someone getting bit or scratched, and they always end up getting affected, and the rest of the group gets fucked because of it. But because they're in such a large area or they're constantly on the move, there's no way to build up that pressure. They're always there's always that opportunity to run away and escape. Unless they're actually surrounded. In here, they're stuck inside. In fact, the government is ensuring that they cannot escape.
And I like the idea that she's actually, it's the found footage that her cameraman's filming this whole thing, and so you feel like you're right in the building with them, of course.
You get this strong sense of claustrophobia in it, which I believe is which I would say, not just believe, but I really feel is the the biggest way of building tension in the film. Because other than that, if it weren't for that claustrophobic feeling, it probably would just seem like a generic zombie-ish kind of,
and if it didn't
film.
have that first person, or, the third person type shot, or something like that, with the actual found footage, if it was just a normal movie, the no score would definitely play a huge role. Yeah. There's actually no score in the movie.
Yeah,
there's sound effects, but
that's it.
They want you to have that uneasy feel. I mean, if they had a music, it could have changed it, but
to be fair, it's pretty much par for course when it comes to found footage. You don't really get a lot of found footage films that I can't even think of one that actually has a full on score. It's even going back to like Blair Witch, 15 years ago at this point.
I thought Blair Witch had a score. I thought like in the house and stuff near the end.
No. It was silent because it was supposed to be all found footage and you're just watching what the cameras did, and they were old cameras. Old, like, 8mm, 16mm film, something like that. And I think, cassette tapes. This is just all in a camcorder, or a broadcast quality camcorder.
Now, basically, these people are all running around in this house, freaking out, trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And the government actually sends 2, agents into the building, and then one gets attacked immediately. Yeah. I mean, so you kind of already get the sense of, they don't really know what to do here either, so that just has to make you even more just neurotic and crazy, wondering if...
Yeah. I mean... Like I said, the claustrophobic feeling is really what builds the tension, and part of that is the fact that there's no real explanation to anything. You know where the infection started for the apartment complex that they're stuck in, but you don't know the source of everything. It's that, it has enough of a mystery to wonder, well, what is it really? Is it really rabies? Is it something else? And the way that you see these infected walk around and act, and, they don't act like, they're not necessarily zombies, but they don't seem like the infected from, the rage-infected individuals from 28 days later, 28 weeks later. They act very differently. They're almost demonic at times.
I mean, could you imagine being in this, you go in this building, there's this normal call, now you're quarantined, and you're watching the news, and the police chief is saying that they've gotten everybody out of the building. I mean, that's when your complete terror sets in.
That's fucked.
And it's like, what do you think? Do you think they blew the building up? Do you think they took it down? Do you think they just went in and clean sweeped it?
I would say, watch the sequel to see what happens, but we're not going to talk about the sequel. I believe there's a record.
I didn't think the sequel really even played up on the first one as much as it takes place on a plane, I thought.
It pretty much is the same virus on a plane. But if I remember right, there are 2 sequels, Record 2, Record 3, and I believe those are incredibly
Those are supposed to actually follow the first
Yeah, and I believe they're actually rather entertaining, if not great films. They're still supposed to be rather solid sequels. They do the original film at least a bit of justice. The sequel, Quarantine 2, fucking rabies on a plane. It's
just because they made a sequel doesn't mean you have to watch it.
Yes, and doesn't mean you should watch it. Kind of like our Leprechauns,
Origins.
Kind of like our Leprechaun podcast. Much like Origins, Leprechaun 4, Back to the Hood. You really don't need to watch this movie's sequel to get anything, because you won't get anything out of it. It's a really long, drawn-out, stupid movie.
Now, I want to talk about the ending real quick, because I did like this ending a lot. Basically, her and...
Spoiler alert, for those who are still interested, go ahead and hit stop now, and you can join us again after you're done watching the movie.
Her and, her cameraman run up to the, this attic to hide out, because they couldn't get down to the basement where they needed to.
Mm-hmm.
And they come across this crazy guy's room they find out he was like a member of a doomsday cult, and that he basically stole a mutated rabies virus from some lab or something.
Mm-hmm.
But they see, basically the lights are dark, and then through the night vision, the cameraman can see this ghoulish, feeble man that's just wandering around this part, and it's pitch black, and it looks like he lives in the dark.
Yeah.
And the second the cameraman, or whoever it is, makes a noise, he gets attacked. And then, of course, she finds the camera and can see him. I mean, and it just leaves you with, okay, what's going to happen? And then she's crawling towards the camera and dragged off. I love it. It's just...
pretty much, it's how Blair Witch should have ended.
Exactly.
A lot of, I remember when Blair Witch came out, I was a freshman in high school, and everyone was going gaga over it. I remember watching it for the first time. It wasn't until it reached DVD, and I remember it was like one of the first DVDs that I think it's the first one I bought personally. The first DVD I ever owned was Gladiator, but this is like the first one I bought myself, because I wanted to see it. For some reason I'd never been able to see it. Got my first DVD player, I got it, and I remember watching it, I'm like, oh, this is cool. The whole found footage thing was completely new at the time, at least for a horror film. And I remember all this tension being built up. It's like, what's all this crazy shit going on? And then you see the ending, and then fucking nothing. Nothing. No sign of a witch, no nothing. You just see a dude in a corner, camera falls, and that's fucking it. This satisfied me at the end. This is, Blair Witch was a blue balls ending. There's quite a few of them in horror films. There's a lot of them in a lot of films, but horror films are notorious for this kind of shit. And I think Quarantine, despite the fact that it might, in a lot of people's eyes, it might not hold up to the original film's standards, but it still succeeds in being a very entertaining, very strong horror film. Lots of good tension, very claustrophobic. And then when it starts building up towards the end, man, it just keeps chugging along real quick, builds up a lot of steam, and it hits you at the end. It's a nice, strong finish. Doesn't leave you wanting.
No, not at all.
No, even though you don't know exactly what happens at the end, it's enough to just like, okay, you put two and two together, there's no denying exactly what happened. You just don't see it.
And that leaves you with even more terror, because your mind can think of some crazy things. I mean, you can only imagine what happened to her, or...
Yeah. Did she turn? Did she get ripped to pieces? Who knows? And I liked it. Did
they fall in love?
Yes.
That's a possibility. I mean, and a little trivia real quick, Jennifer Carpenter actually asked never to see that final attic set, so when she actually saw it, when they were filming her, she wouldn't know the geography or anything like that. So some of that fear could have been, real, or at least more genuine.
Yeah, especially towards the end. I mean, that gives it a lot of credit. That gives it a little bit more realism to it, because it's like, it's someone in a suit, but if they're chasing you and you don't know which way you're supposed to go as an actress, it kind of leaves you blind and scraping for something.
And Doug Jones actually played that creepy, feeble old man. I mean, and looking at his career, he's been in just about everything. Batman Returns, Hocus Pocus, Mimic, Hellboy. He actually plays the Fawn in Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, he's in a lot of Guillermo del Toro films.
And that makeup actually took, I was reading, it's like 4 hours for him to get into that full body prosthetic, and they only filmed him for 1 day.
Yeah. It's funny too, because that seems to be the pattern when he does all the prosthetic type work that he does. He doesn't, I guess one of the big things, he didn't really want to do another Hellboy film because he doesn't want to get back into those prosthetics. The guy does a lot of creepy stuff, a lot of entertaining stuff, and, you could always tell it's him.
You'll never look at Abe Sapien the same way again. No, you won't. After seeing Quarantine.
Oh, but, there are a lot of films out there that will leave you disappointed by the end of the film. As good as it is, Blair Witch for me is one of the biggest notorious kind of thing that falls into that category. But Quarantine is not.
And it's been done quite a bit now with the found footage. It's kind of spawned a new, following.
Yeah.
Is what I want to say.
It's built up a lot of steam over the last 15 years. There's been a lot of copycats with Blair Witch. Oddly enough, Blair Witch 2 didn't do it, but, 7 years, no, not even 7 years, we're talking 9 years later, Quarantine did it, and it did it well. Record, obviously, was a few years earlier than that, and it did it well, and it did it right. And that's the biggest thing, is that there's a lot of found footage films that just don't do it right. It's just kind of there. It's a gimmick that doesn't really play up on anything, but Quarantine does it, Record does it, and I can't praise this movie enough for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a decent one. I go back and watch it every now and then. It's not something I watch, constantly, but it holds up very well. Especially for a found footage film, which, usually those are, it's 50-50 with
you never really know what you're gonna get. It's not a box of chocolates. It doesn't have the little map for you to tell, is it gonna be good or is it gonna be coconut filled?
Exactly.
Right?
I think that's going to do it.
Yeah, so for this edition of Two Guys, One Movie, this is Steve Arvizo.
And Charles Musick.
And remember, kids, when you're playing with deadly experimental viruses, don't be winning witnesses.
Contain the truth.